Hey, Carrie, can you do a sound check for me?
Sound check.
Awesome, thank you.
Uh-huh. Gloria, did you have shoulder surgery?
I did. I broke my clavicle while skiing. So I had broken 3 places. So had surgery a week and a half ago.
Oh my goodness. Well, at least you sound like a badass. That's a good story. Not slipped on the ice.
You know, just one more thing I have in common with Lindsey Vonn.
Yeah. I was on the triple black diamond. There I was.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you heal quickly.
Thank you. I am on the road to recovery.
Oh, well, that's good.
Yeah.
Hi there, we're just waiting for a few more folks to show up.
Here.
Kunal, we have a quick procedural item, and before we can introduce you as the new board attorney, we have one commissioner that may or may not be in attendance, but we do have a second alternate that's available. Should we seat the alternate, and are we obligated to switch back to the regular member if he attends?
If the regular member comes in time, and the alternate can just step aside. So just as long as that's said on the record.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, I'm calling the January 2025 meeting of Manitou Springs Planning Commission to order. First item of business is roll call. Commissioner Rosenthal. Here. Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Commissioner Casey.
Present.
Commissioner Day.
Present.
Commissioner Storm.
Present.
Commissioner Latimer.
Present.
And I'm Commissioner Delwich. And so next item, guess we don't have any minutes to approve, or do we? Okay, so next item would be public comment on non-agenda items, and this is an opportunity to speak to items that aren't on the agenda. And we'd like to limit it to 3 minutes, and we generally don't do a back and forth. It's just sort of you state your comments, and we'll take note of it, take notes, and move on from there. So it looks like John Maynard is there, and just state your name and address for the record. And
Thank you. John Maynard. I live at 1320 Indian Oaks Place in Manitou Springs. I'm here this evening to talk about what I perceive as irregularities at last month's Planning Commission meeting. First of all, Chairman Delwish, you on item the density variance at 123 Manitou Avenue did not disclose that you were a member of the URA board, nor did you introduce the action that was taken by the URA board supporting that item. Based on your past comments on this property, I believe that there was bias involved and that you probably should have recused yourself. The bias I'm referred to is covered in Colorado case law, and I'll state the case: Mountain States Telephone and Telegraph Company versus Public Utilities Commission. And I can read the site if anybody is interested. It was a 1988 case. Secondly, the selection of alternatives, I believe, was done outside of public process. And it's my understanding that one commissioner asked if she was needed days before the hearing, and it was told she was not. And then a different alternate was seated. That leads me to believe that the decision was made outside of public process. In fact, if you review the tape of the meeting, the alternate commissioner was in place with name tag in place before the meeting even started. And I think this is inappropriate, or at least appears to be inappropriate. I have 3 recommendations for you as to how to proceed. First of all, I would suggest that you need to adopt standard operating procedures for how this board operates as required by the city code. My understanding is that you do not have any at this time. Secondly, I would strongly recommend that you annually have the city attorney provide ethics training to all of your board members. And lastly, because of the at least appearance of impropriety on the hearing on 123 Manitou Avenue, I suggest that you vote to reconsider that and rehear that item. Thank you.
thank you. And Okay,
There is another member of the public that would like to speak via Zoom.
okay. Rich Block?
Yes, I don't, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Ms. President? Okay, very good. Thank you. Again, for the record, my name is Rich Block with Paragon Realty. We were the presenters last month, but our legal address is 8700 North Street, Suite 310, Fishers, Indiana. Also with me listening in is my son, John. He and I both participated in the meeting last month. This is regarding the same property that John Maynard referenced, although I didn't know he was presenting. But in any event, it is the former La Fun Motel property that we had the variance hearing with you all last month. We did write a letter to you. Hopefully you've received that, but I did want to make just a couple of quick points. One is we decided not to appeal the decision. And we felt like a better approach was to work cooperatively with the city. We presented last night in the same public comment section of the city council, requesting the same, that the council, or I guess maybe staff or whatever the appropriate group is, open up and work through a decision related to changing the code. It seemed like that was a matter that was, I guess, at the heart of the decision by the Planning Commission. Clearly, I think, tried to present our case as to why it was necessary to increase the density, the number of units that were being proposed at this site. And, I think the problem had to do with the existing code. So what we have asked for from council, and we just wanted really to alert the Planning Commission that we would like to be a part of the process and hope that the city will review the current code to address this matter. We understand that it may take some time to do that, but that is our desire. And we felt like it was better done, if you will, working in collaboration with the parties that would include council, Planning Commission, and planning staff, rather than, appealing the decision. So I just wanted the Planning Commission to be aware of that and appreciate the consideration there.
Thank you. And before we go on, I'll just state that both items that were addressed in this public comment are tangential issues that we do have 2 items on the agenda that will address both of those issues. So moving on, we'll go to new business, and basically the process would be, at this point, I described the process, and we don't I don't see anyone in the, I guess there is still a couple of people online in the audience. So I'll just describe, basically we call an item for consideration, and staff gives their findings and recommendations, and we open the hearing to the public if anybody in the public wants to comment on the item. And following that, we deliberate and we vote either to approve, deny, possibly table an item, or postpone if appropriate. And with that, we'll move on. Are there any conflicts or ex parte contacts to disclose? Okay, seeing none, let's move on. The first, the item we have is major temporary use 2404 for an unpaved parking lot.
Thank you. For the record, Chelsea Royston presenting on behalf of the city. We have a major temporary use permit to allow an unpaved parking lot in the commercial zone district. This is at 132, 134, and 142 Manitou Avenue, formerly developed with the Dillon Motel. Excuse me. The city of Manitou Springs purchased this property in December 2023 with the intent to develop a surface parking lot and office space. All but two of the existing buildings were demolished for this purpose, and the city is pursuing a phased approach in order to expedite the project. So while the intent is to eventually develop a paved parking lot that conforms with code requirements, the city is requesting a temporary use permit to allow a gravel or dirt parking lot to exist there. And the reason for this, while a parking lot is permitted in the commercial zone district, our development standards require it to be hard surfaced. And so the city is in a situation where in order to facilitate the timeline of another project for the Hiawatha Gardens parking lot, that parking lot needs to be closed down in order to work on that project this summer. And so in order to offset the loss of parking spaces at Hiawatha, the city is asking to have a dirt parking lot at the Dillon Motel temporarily, with the intent that once design and permitting is in place and the Hiawatha lot is open again, then the final construction of the Dillon parking lot can be completed. Here we have the proposed location. Again, the easternmost lot of the three here, that is, there are two pre-existing buildings that are going to be rehabilitated there for office spaces and restrooms. And then the two western lots are the focus of the dirt parking lot. Here we have the proposed site plan. There are several improvements that are proposed to take place during this phase. There will be concrete ADA parking spaces, and those will be on the easternmost lot adjacent to the structures there. Those are being designed and will be constructed with the intent that those will remain and be the final condition, so that that ADA compliance is never jeopardized through the process. There will also be curb stops to delineate the parking spaces, as well as a split rail fence that will kind of guide traffic through the property, along grades that make more sense, rather than kind of going up the steep grade change there at the southern part of the boundary. There will also be electrical conduit for lighting and security that is going to be installed with the intent that it will facilitate the final condition, which will be reviewed under the major development plan. The photometric plan will be part of that submittal that you'll see at that point. So we have findings and review criteria for temporary use permits. One of them is that the use will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, and general welfare of the zone district. And staff doesn't believe that it will be offensive in any of those manners. This is in the commercial zone district. It is being developed in conjunction with a bus stop for Mountain Metro. And so the intent is to direct longer term, 4 hours or more parking to use the Dillon lot, and then access public transit to get further into town if they need to, or eventually access the Creek Walk Trail through a pedestrian bridge at the north of the site. Again, you'll see all of those improvements in the major development plan. The second finding, the second review criteria is if located outside of the downtown zone district, adequate off-street parking meeting the standards provided in the code are available, and this criterion really isn't applicable since this is a parking lot. We've used this mechanism to review other temporary surfaced parking lots in commercial zone districts. So while this isn't explicitly permitted in the code, we do find that there's adequate precedence to utilize this mechanism for this purpose. So with that, here are the motion language options, and this concludes my presentation.
Any questions for staff? Okay. Seeing, we have a couple people online. If anybody in the audience wants to comment on this item, now is the time.
Rich, your hand is still raised, but I think that's from before. If you do have a comment though, please feel free.
Okay, seeing no comment, I'll close the public hearing. Megan? Oh, sorry. Sorry, what?
Would Commissioner Day's comments come after the closing of the public hearing?
Either way, it doesn't matter. Okay.
Okay,
Sorry.
fair enough. I do believe that adding more parking, temporary or permanent, will endanger the public health, safety, and welfare of the people of Manitou and the visitors. I'd like to recognize the lives lost in LA today. I'd also like to recognize that in at least one instance, public safety officers in the Los Angeles region instructed people who were in their cars trying to evacuate to abandon their cars and walk toward the ocean instead of being overtaken and burned alive in their cars because of the wildfires. The more parking we build in Manitou, the more we put our lives at risk in the event of an emergency evacuation and those of our visitors. So I believe this has a major impact on the health, safety, and welfare of our community. I'll be voting no.
Comments? Okay, so we've closed the public comment portion of the hearing. Anyone would like to entertain a motion?
Carrie Storm, motion to approve the major temporary use permit MJT 2404 as submitted and outlined with the staff's conditions.
Second,
Roy Rosenthal, second.
Well, there are. If that matters.
Correct.
okay,
I'm for it. Yes.
okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And I guess, Carrie, I guess you could restate the motion to exclude the conditions since there are none.
Motion to approve major temporary use permit 2404 as submitted.
And Roy, you're okay with second?
Second.
Okay,
My apologies.
that's okay. Now, so are there any, if there's any more, no more discussion, then we can vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, so the motion carries 6-1. Now we'll move on. The next item of business is election of officers. And the first is to elect a chair. Are there any nominations?
I'll make a motion to nominate Alan as chair.
Any other nominations? Mike?
No, I'll second that.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay. Then all those in favor, I guess, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so moving on to Vice Chair. Motion, the nominations are open.
I nominate Mike Casey.
I'll second that.
I think that I appreciate that. But I think this should be a rotating position, just so other people get to experience the thrill and the joy.
You believe only the vice should be rotating, not the chair?
That's correct. I do. And I mean, I had one applicant when I was up here. It was very educational. So if anybody else wants to have that experience, I think it's good to rotate. And I need one less vice out of my life anyway, to be honest. Justin, I think you would be a good man to sit at the right hand of the Father.
Are you making a nomination?
I am.
Okay. Are you okay with that, Justin? Okay. I'll second that.
Well, does anybody else, is there any other nominations, I guess?
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, so are you withdrawing your nomination, Mike, or would you like to?
Well, yes, I am withdrawing.
So basically you don't want us to vote for you.
I think, yeah, if you decline the nomination, I think is how that typically, you can say you don't want it.
I respectfully decline in hopes that for the rotation theory.
Okay. Okay, so any more nominations? Seeing none, then let's vote. All those in favor of Justin? Okay. So we have a chair and a vice chair now. And of course, if the chair and the vice chair are not there, the precedent is that the most senior person would then take on I think we've done that a few times. Okay, so we'll move on. There are a couple other business items that I asked the staff to put on the thing. The first is the expectations for alternate commissioners, and this is pretty much came up from last month, and we've never formally articulated this, but it's been the policy in the long time that I've been on the commission that in those rare instances, because it doesn't happen that often, where we have more alternates showing up than there are spots to seat, we rotate. And like when I was first an alternate, there were two of us and we always showed up and we'd take turns, and it was just sort of understood. The idea was get everybody to have experience. And you know, my thought at the time was that it was an expectation that alternates show up at every meeting. And in fact, you know, reviewing the code, it says it's recommended but not required. So I just wanted to state that now, you know, get that on the table. And if there are any suggestions on ways we should change this policy or formalize it more, I'm think it's time to do that. Megan?
I think that's the challenge, is it's not formalized, it's not a policy. So that it should be written down somewhere so that alternates would know when they might be seated and when they wouldn't be, and if they showed up and were seated the last time and they wouldn't. It's just to be clear rather than sort of verbal understanding.
Okay. And if it's okay with you, I since I'm the chair again, I'll take on the responsibility to try to put together that in writing, and maybe, you know, we did work on a draft policies and procedures, and it kind of, I don't know if staff still has a copy of that anywhere. It was like back, I think before
Yes,
Hannah was,
I found the draft from 2021. It looks like that was never formalized. I will say that the code does grant the authority to the chair to seat an alternate. It does not give guidelines for how that is chosen. The guidelines that I found, the draft SOP, excuse me, that had previously indicated seniority, but that was crossed out or redlined, I guess, and brought before this commission to indicate that it would be alternates. So I think that is, if that's the will of the
Yeah.
commission, we can absolutely work on formalizing those SOPs.
okay, could you, possibly share that document with me and with the vice chair, and we can look at it and we can put it on the agenda for next month to review it, so everybody is comfortable with that.
Yes.
Great.
Alan, could I have a question, please? So does this mean we currently have two alternates and we have one alternate position open? Are we saying that all alternates would attend every meeting as a part of the training and getting to know the procedures of the planning commission? Or are we saying that you as chairperson will have one alternate attend each meeting and you will rotate between the three?
Not exact. What I was suggesting was that first of all, it's encouraged, and I think that's the language, is it's encouraged for alternates to attend.
Right.
And when multiple alternates attend and there's fewer seats than there are alternates, that we just rotate. The idea is everybody gets exposure and experience. So that's sort of how I was reading it. Megan?
The municipal code actually states alternates are invited and requested to attend all meetings of the board or commission, but are not required to do so. They may take part in the discussion of any matter that comes before a board, except for quasi-judicial matters in which they may not participate unless they have been appointed in the place of an absent member. So that actually is a little bit of a greater clarification that maybe all alternates are always seated, but any vote would fall to whoever what the
That doesn't
standard,
make sense. Yeah, you don't have enough
Okay.
seats.
who's seated to vote. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's the way I've interpreted it and the way I've seen on other boards that on things that are not quasi-judicial, all participate, but don't deliberate and discuss. It's only the 7 that are seated. But anything like these items, if all 7 regular commissioners were here and the 2 alternates were, when we got to this section after the quasi-judicial, everybody would sit and participate and discuss. And that's sort of what I'm thinking. Okay. Okay with everybody? And we'll come back and talk about it next month too.
Just on that note, is there any orientation? Did you have any orientation or teaching or?
My planning degree and
Besides that?
certification as a planner.
Nothing?
To be fair, I met with you when you started and we had a discussion and I told you you could call me anytime. I gave you my phone number, my email, and I think, pretty much that's how we've done it. And we did start a couple years ago, talked about an orientation.
Yeah.
manual. It's just, we've had a lot of churning and a lot of other, things come up that have kind of driven conversation. Like, I think 2 years ago, we were so wrapped up with the code update that we didn't feel like we wanted to break the backs of staff any more than you're already overwhelmed. Mike?
You never gave me your phone number.
That's not true. I have texts that'll prove otherwise.
It was my understanding that it was typically the chair that did the initiation or orientation. So I think I'll seek clarification from the city clerk, since she kind of guides how staff interacts with boards. I'll see what I can find out.
Yeah, we've always, had the informal orientation. And Mike, I think, was it 2 years ago that you started working on it, or?
I'm sure I still have it.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, the American Planning Association has to have some like video or quick course that people could take, so it wouldn't be a burden on staff or other members of the
There-
commission.
There are plenty of resources through CML and DOLA and APA and
Yeah,
yes.
I think we just find
but
one and-
as how it relates to Manitou code, I think is where we're looking for that clarification.
Yeah, I think it would be nice. I know there was a CML document that was just sort of an intro to quasi judicial boards. And we had talked about, I think last year, about getting access to that. I think I have a copy, but it's paper copy. I think now everything's in PDF and we should be able to get that to anybody.
Give them a hard copy, paper copy of the code.
No, we don't. When I first was on this commission, we actually got mailed the packet every month in the US mail. And then, people realized, wow, the amount of time it took, just that delay plus the cost. And so we had our little mailboxes. I don't know if they're even there still, but yeah. Okay. So, okay, well, then we've beaten that one up. Let's move on. The other item was the LUDC updates. And this has come up. People have informally mentioned this. And I brought this up when I met with Denise last month. And I said, look, it's, what should we do, or how should we address this? Because one of the things that you'll also find in the code is that, in the municipal code, is boards and commissions do not direct staff. And, we can't say, hey, Fred, we want to start working on a code update. Can you schedule that for next month? What we do is we can put together a request, and then that will go to council. It's really the prerogative of council to decide if and when they want us to work on the code. And I think there's some things that probably have to get done, if I'm correct. If we don't address the ADU ordinance by the 30th of June, DOLA will give us one. And one size does not fit all communities in Colorado. So I think that's on the table. And there are a couple other things that I've heard, like from a couple of people, like we need to work on and I agree with this, our variance code, the procedures, the criteria is kind of like a straitjacket in some cases. Like it's, and I think Justin's pointed this out several times about it's really hard to argue that there's not reasonable use without a variance in most cases. And so I think we need to sort of put our heads together and brainstorm on that. I have some ideas. I don't want to talk about them tonight, but that's one item that I think needs to be addressed is variances. Maybe think about the criteria or any way to fix it, and maybe also clarify what things like hardship mean and some of those other areas, like looking at other codes around the Front Range, some of them explicitly say economic reality is not a hardship that justifies a variance. And so if you look at our specific variance criteria, it really is the words talk about, they lean towards like setbacks, height, lot coverage, if you really look at the words. And so there's some ambiguity there that I think we could clarify. So those are two areas that I'd like, if commission agrees, to suggest, if we make a motion to pass on to council, that those are areas we'd like to look at. And then the other one that I hear, and I don't know how it will be received by council, but possibly is densities, are they where we want them? There's been some feeling in the community that they're too outdated or not addressing reality. So those are three areas that I see that we could possibly be discussing. And I open up any other ideas or thoughts.
Well, are you saying that we have to hear from the city council for us to go forward with suggestions, or can we make suggestions and then the city council can consider them?
We can say to city council, these are areas that we think are pressing. We don't want to kick the can down the road for another year, another 2 years. We think we need to have this. We recommend that these things be addressed this year, because we can sit here and talk all day about what we think, but if all of a sudden, we say, okay, we want A, B, C, so on done, we dump that on staff. We're giving staff work. We don't have the authority to tell staff to do something. What we do is respectfully ask council to give us direction to do the things we want to do. It sounds convoluted, but.
Well, so we recommend that the variance be reconsidered. And they say, we agree that they should be reconsidered. Do we then come up with recommendations for council?
We, generally, the way it works, and Fred looks like he can weigh in on this. Usually, if there's specific things, or, maybe we have an item, a work session item at the end of a meeting where we could sort of come up with some broad brush, and then we kick it over to staff, and on their schedule and their timeline, then they'll come back and say, this is where we want to go. Does that make sense, Fred?
Yeah, I think so. For the record, Fred Roland Hagen, Planning Director. It's always helpful for boards and commissions as well as staff to get that direction from City Council. That gives us support, and it also gives us some cover to do what the City Council wants us to do. So, with that said, all the departments will provide a work plan to the city administrator, and that's vetted through City Council and everything like that. But if there's something in particular that a commission wants to look at, that's when I think it's helpful for the commission to say, hey, City Council, we would like staff to look at X, and then let City Council provide that direction to staff and to the Planning Commission to look at X, if that makes sense.
I guess my question is, can we tonight agree to make that recommendation to City Council to consider the variances?
We can make a recommendation for council, whatever we want. And that's what I'm suggesting is if there's a accord among us to make that recommendation. And I've identified 3 things that I think are of interest that I've heard from various people, and I'm just opening it up. Are there other things that we should be thinking about?
Well, I couldn't help but notice that short-term rentals have come to a screeching halt. Is that still the case?
Yes, and that is, they're kind of at capacity. So, there are very few properties remaining, outside of buffers that are developed with eligible property or eligible residences. So they're kind of at the natural,
So
maximum that was set.
geographically versus quantity? Meaning, because I think they were capped at 52. So you're saying that the 500 circle is maxed out, basically?
Yes, let me pull up our map actually.
Well, I see it all the time.
Oh, yeah, well, that makes sense.
But it's not the quantity, it's the geography.
Correct.
Okay, okay.
We are fairly close to our quantity cap as well, but it's really just the sorry, I can't multitask apparently. It's really just our buffers that are setting that restriction. The blue properties are the properties that are eligible in terms of buffers. A lot of these do not have residential structures on them, or they're not zoned residential. So they're really that's why we've seen the natural decline of those applications.
I don't know if it's even appropriate for me to ask, but are you getting a lot of applications that are you're just denying?
We don't get full applications. We just get inquiries. And we tell folks that, based on this map, it doesn't look like you're eligible. And so.
Yeah, you reminded me that we did have a discussion, I think when Austin was still our city attorney, and he, we asked him, like, could we just basically stop doing short-term rentals? And it was something I believe was articulated that, yeah, we could, we have legal justification to do that. And I think there was some, I don't know if there's still the feeling, but there was some just thoughts that maybe that would be something to address, to just basically say, we're not doing short-term rentals anymore. The ones that we have are grandfathered in. Because again, this is a housing issue too.
Right.
So does anybody remember that or interested in doing that?
I kind of remember that, Alan. I actually had a kind of a clarifying question if I could ask. It made me curious after hearing some of this discussion. I want to say maybe it was a year ago, there was an application and it spurred some conversation, and forgive me if I'm misstating the procedure here, but there was some discussion about if a short-term rental owner basically ceased using it as a short-term rental, there's a certain period in which it would lapse. Is that true? And has that happened at all recently? I'm just curious.
Yeah, great question.
So there's theory and there's practice. And in theory, we have a software that goes through the short-term rental listings in town and notes which ones don't have active business licenses, haven't been actively used recently. And so it's flagging those. The enforcement part of it is lacking. It's a kind of a capacity issue. And then there's also the software can only do so much, right? Because some of them have short-term rentals, some of them have conditional use permits, some of them are actually just motel units because they're in commercial zones. but they're all using the same software to host their permitting. And so, and their rentals. Sorry, my computer just did something weird. So I believe those are being sort of filtered out, but not at any sort of rapid rate.
But Chelsea, don't they have to renew their business license on an annual basis? So if their business license did not renew, wouldn't that make them ineligible to continue as short-term rental?
Yes. Right, but a lot of folks, once they have that short-term rental, they aren't letting it lapse. We don't see that happen regularly. Folks know how valuable those are typically, and so we've seen a couple that have transferred hands through sales, but those are under very specific guidelines. So there's just not a ton of attrition in those.
All right, thank you.
So would that be, is there still interest in maybe working, having that update too? We could discuss that too in a work session.
Maybe just one more question. Chelsea, you said you don't receive applications, but you do receive inquiries. Do you have a sense of how many per month that would be?
A handful, probably under 5.
Okay, thank you.
Are you suggesting having the conversation of banning them?
Yes. If that's if there's that interest. I think, when we brought this up a year or two ago, there was sort of a lot of agreement that they're the most frustrating thing we do when it's, basically just a checklist and people get them and everybody in the neighborhood hates them and they undermine our housing. And, so that was the feeling I know a couple of years ago. And I don't know, do we want to throw that in the bucket of things we want to ask council if we can talk about?
I think we risk legal challenge if we do so.
Pardon?
I think we risk legal challenge if we ban all short-term rentals. And one of the things that our former city attorney was saying was that there was lawsuits against some other communities from people who wanted more short-term rentals or the right to short-term rentals, and the city ordinances restricting short-term rentals were being challenged and undermined, and that the law may come for us too. I think we've got a good thing going. It's capped. And we shouldn't bring that up because that is the most controversial and time-sucking thing that could happen.
Yeah. Okay, that's probably a good point. And along that lines, I know that right now Woodland Park is about to have I think it's already been challenged, and it's Chelsea.
If I may, staff has also noticed a couple items that could be potential conversations. I would agree that maybe focusing on just ADUs instead of ADUs and short-term rentals at the same time, those two always kind of seem to get muddied. So just for clarity's sake, it might be worth it to figure out one before the other. You also mentioned with ADUs and the land use regulations that were passed. I believe there are 5 total, though I think only 3 or 4 apply to Manitou Springs. So we would be pursuing those amendments as well, things like off-street parking and family definitions and things like that are kind of cleanup amendments. And then the other item that Fred and I have talked about a little bit, but I seem to come before you a lot with renewals for temporary uses. And I would like either some clarity or some administrative provisions to allow a certain amount of extension on that or not allow it or however, but that seems to take up a lot of your time and my time. So
You mean the fact that they have to be renewed every 12 months?
yes, And that there's not actually a provision for extending them in the code.
You mean to do them administratively?
Extension.
Or through planning commission.
Oh, okay.
But that's been the practice. And so it was determined a couple years ago, once the new code was in place, that we could uphold what we had previously been doing in that regard. So it's just kind of a murky area that I think could use some clarity.
Okay, so basically you're saying review the temporary use code.
I think so, and potentially temporary use, but also maybe temporary development standards or something of that. We also get these like the dirt parking lots, for instance, that are not actually a temporary use. The use is permanent, but the development standards are waived temporarily or modified temporarily. And so I think I'm not quite sure how that looks, but I think it could be something that we could talk about, or you could
Okay.
talk about, really. But
Okay.
thank you for letting me interject.
Anything else?
I have a few things. I think that our current land use development code makes it the historic built environment in Manitou illegal in many cases. Anybody who's got an older house has to come before us if they need to, do any work on their house. And so I think things like the parking minimum should be eliminated. I think the minimum lot frontage should be dropped in the general residential zone from 50 feet to 25.
Okay,
I can go on.
yeah. Now we're, rather than get into the real details, this is like the category. So the category I think you're saying is existing non-conforming properties.
No. The category is actually the setbacks and minimum standards that require a sprawling, single-family detached garage, expensive home development and cap densities, including in the commercial zone, like that we have a suburban sprawling zoning code requirements in the many minimum standards, setbacks, frontage, lot size, and dwelling units per acre that all require sprawling development forms and make the historic built environment in Manitou illegal. So
Yeah, I have to take issue with saying it's illegal. We haven't made any of those properties illegal that
No,
were
I understand.
done before we had a zoning code.
Right, but we
And-
require all new building to not be like that at all. We make any new building that looks like the historic built environment in Manitou illegal. That's what I'm saying.
Well, but part of that reason is for safety, right? Because the built environment from the 1890s, 1920s, where they didn't have to have the setbacks to allow fire protection to come through, pull hoses, that kind of thing, is now required. So are you saying that that's a bad thing?
I'm saying that we can develop with safety requirements and accommodations for sure, but that we should have a 0 front setback and smaller side setbacks. I think they're currently 7 feet. I would recommend 3.
7.5.
Smaller.
Yeah, the sense I get from talking to the people I know on council, there's not an appetite to open up the whole land use code at this time. So I think we'd be better served by focusing on the things that are attainable, like ADUs, definition of family, the temporary uses, I think is if that's a easy cleanup, I don't think there's any heartburn on that. I think if we open up the whole thing of dimensional standards, we're just going to be, I'm not in favor of that right now. After the work we went through for about 18 months, we had a task force that worked on it, and we had work sessions with council, with commission and council. And I don't think it makes sense to open up that all right now.
I would suggest that we open up the dwelling units per acre then.
And that's one of the things on here that I had suggested. So other thoughts?
Would it make sense for staff to compile a list, if commissioners could email, and we can kind of maybe then sort through, kind of bring that back as something, then a list to talk about strategically rather than kind of debating as we go? Or would that be helpful?
You're saying we don't make a recommendation now and let you come back with a draft recommendation?
I think I'm suggesting that commissioners email staff with the things that they would like to review. And then during the next planning commission meeting, maybe there's more of a work session set up where the whole list is compiled to talk about. I don't know. Fred, what do you think?
I think we can do either way. It probably depends on what the planning commission wants. But what I think what you're doing is maybe providing more time for planning commissioners to think about this and add things before the planning commission takes action tonight or sends a recommendation tonight. Or if the planning commission knows, if you think you have a pretty complete list tonight, you can choose to send it on to city council.
Yeah, what I was hoping was to not task either of any of the planning staff with doing this work without without council or city administrator saying, let's spend time on this. So if it's just a matter of, we've emailed our ideas, you put together a list, but not, I don't want to get in a position where we're asking you to do work, so.
Yeah, I think it would just be preparing meeting materials. But there is always time in the event that city council directs staff to pursue these changes. There's time for work sessions and things like that at that time too. So.
Okay, I'm comfortable with, what do people think? I'm happy with the list we have, but are there?
Go ahead.
I'd like to hear the list for one thing, but maybe we should just pick our battles and instead of a list, just give them one or two top priorities, and we can always come down later.
I think
Let's do it now. That's what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm in favor of going ahead with the three
Okay.
that you chose and bringing that to city council.
Okay. So we have variance criteria, density, ADUs.
Yeah, ADUs, we have a deadline on, right?
Yeah. ADUs, I think that's not really, you're going to have to ask us to do it, or we're going to.
That's probably coming regardless of what city council directs.
Yeah. So basically variance criteria, density, and those are the two that we've come up with that are not, and then the clarification of temporary uses.
Perfect.
And the other land use regulations that are coming from DOLA. I think those are in the same vein as ADUs.
The other
There were about five bills that were passed in that session. And so ADUs are one of them, and then it's minimum off-street parking requirements, family definitions. And I always forget the fourth one that applies to us. But there are several new acts that apply to Manitou
I
Springs.
believe it's quantity of people, right?
That's, yeah, for family
that's
definition,
related,
it- yeah.
Okay, so it would be variance criteria, density, and state mandated updates.
And that staff will provide guidance to council on those state mandates? Or
Well, we're just basically sending a memo to council saying, these are the things we'd like to engage.
understood, I'm just
and-
on the state mandates. Is
yeah.
that something that?
Well, they're
staff-
gonna, that's sort of redundant, but it's okay to say it that, we recognize that we need to work on it. Whether it's planning commission or staff, somehow the state mandated things have to be done. And somewhere in there will be in the process. And so the idea would be just to say, yeah, that's the other thing we know has to be under consideration, because it gets down to staff time and other projects, other requirements that are going on in the world or in the community. Fred?
Also, I have talked with legal counsel about some of the legislation that was passed, and so city council is going to be getting some legal advice on how to respond to that legislation, and I'm sure that's going to affect what the planning commission does with those items.
Okay. So I could try to make a motion. And, I would move that we ask council to consider having us move forward on reviewing variance criteria, density, and state mandated updates to land use. Does that cover it? So that's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay.
Can I add something kind of on that topic, though?
Sure.
Kind of hearing some of the suggestions formulate here, I'm wondering if it would be meritorious to have a work session perhaps on this at the next meeting. We could get all the commissioners here, including the alternates, and kind of have that discussion about the topics we just raised. We could prioritize them. I know memories fade, right? In a year, we might forget we wanted to talk about these things. And if we decide that there's certain things we don't want to attack right now, we could revisit them at a later date. But it might just help us, formalize our memories and prioritize our thoughts.
So you're saying you want another motion?
No, I'm just wondering if we can add perhaps an agenda item to the next meeting where we have a work session after the quasi judicial session, however you want to shake it. But we'd have all the commissioners up here and we could perhaps do more brainstorming like we did tonight. Create a priority list of things we'd like to raise. Maybe they don't get raised in the next 6 months, but maybe they're next year, next 2 years, that sort of thing. And it's like a living, working document that we kind of focus our energy on.
So this is more just a work session for our benefit, not for staff, not for council, just for
Correct.
us to say, this is what's bugging me, lot frontage, setback, parking requirements, whatever might be our hot button issue. Okay, I think that sounds good. And that won't take staff preparation. That's just, you may have to sit here and listen to us talk for 20 minutes or something.
Get to, yes.
Yeah.
Not have to. But we do also have on the agenda for next month, our annual legal training. So
Good. Okay.
our annual legal training from our attorney is on next month's agenda as well.
Okay. Anything else?
Fred, did you I'm on the wrong part of the agenda.
Anything else from staff?
Yeah, just a couple updates. Let's see, if you were on any of the Plan Manitou 2.0 working groups, you should have received an email, I think it was before the holidays, indicating that a draft is out. It's available for public review, and we're getting the word out. But if you want to take a look at it, it's out on the Plan Manitou webpage. And I'm happy to send all planning commissioners a link to that so you can take a look at that. But with that said, we are scheduling the next round of public engagement. We're going to be engaging the working groups on Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday the 21st. It's right after MLK Day. So Tuesday, January 21st, and then we're going to have a public meeting on Wednesday, the 22nd. I'm still working with Denise in getting another joint working session between Planning Commission and City Council scheduled, hoping to do that in February. We're still looking at dates. It might not happen until the last week of February. There's a possibility I don't know if we'd be able to use your time, your agenda time on the second Wednesday, although we already have some agenda items, so that may not work. Long story short, we're still trying to figure out a time to do that.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, we are not encouraged to attend public meetings on these topics, correct?
I guess from my perspective, I'm would be kind of neutral on that. This is I guess what they call a legislative action. It's not a quasi judicial action. So I've seen city council members attend public meetings, and so I think it's fine for planning commissioners to also attend public meetings. It gives you an idea of what the public is thinking about it.
I would ask that you give staff a heads up if you intend to go so we can publicly notice it as a potential open meeting.
Yeah, that's true. If there's a quorum, we do have to notice it. So for example, that's what we've done when we know that a quorum of city councilors have attended a public meeting. We've made sure that we've noticed that as a formal city council meeting.
Like an example would have been the meeting last night to talk about the Dillon Mobility Hub.
Oh, for city council?
Well, for us, if I didn't even think about that. I didn't go to it, but I didn't even consider what if two other commissioners were there? Is that?
Yeah. So when you have a quorum, when there's a quorum of commissioners attending, that should be noticed as a meeting.
I do think that work sessions are a little different because there isn't an opportunity for public engagement. So if you're just there listening, I thought we have our attorney on the line. Maybe we should toss it to him.
Hey everyone, I don't think I've been introduced, but my name is Kanal Parikh and I'm taking over as the attorney for the Manitou Planning Commission. Can you guys repeat the question again?
We're wondering if city planning commissioners are able to attend public engagement sessions for the Plan Manitou update, which would eventually be reviewed by the Planning Commission and recommended action would be sent to City Council.
There's That's a good question. I'll look into it and get back to you. I think on first instinct, I would say no. Because if it's coming in front of the commission, then going to a meeting beforehand, you're getting, information that's not on the record and that wasn't potentially submitted for review.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, maybe at the training next month, that can be an agenda item. And it's not so much this upcoming meeting. My question was more generic for any meeting that the city holds on any topic, really. That has public engagement.
I
very common.
Yeah, I think I think attending a meeting, because you all are obviously citizens of Manitou, so having a meeting that is not coming in front of you all in your capacity as planning commission members, I think that's fine. There could be some conflict of interest issues if you're going to a public meeting where an application or something related to that is coming in front of you at a later time,
But we
even if
don't
you're
know
not
that.
asking questions. Sorry.
Excuse me, I'm just saying that most times we don't know that. Sometimes at a public meeting, something might be discussed and then 6 months later, it comes before planning commission. So if we could get a little more specific, that would be helpful, because I have felt kind of in limbo with wanting to attend something and feeling like, okay, it may not be appropriate for me to do so.
Yep.
Thank you.
So anything else? Are we ready to adjourn? Okay, let's adjourn the meeting.
Good night,
Thanks,
all.
everybody.